Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Maira Sajidah Zainal Arifin and I am from BRM4B. So today I would like to tell you the consideration in this situation. So the issue is Madam Useful contact her son Useless and persuaded him to return to Ipoh and make him to further study in accountancy at College Professional Mara, Ipoh. She offered to her son with 1,000 ringgit as his monthly expenses and a single-story terrace house. Useless agreed to the offer, but suddenly, after 6 months, his mother stopped giving the expenses and asked him to leave the house because of the misunderstanding. Useless want to take the legal action against his mother. Okay, regarding to this issue, the relevant section for this situation is Section 26 of Contract Act 1950, where in this situation stated that when at the desire of the promiser and the promisee or any other person has done or abstained from doing or does or promise to do or abstain from doing such action and abstinence or promise is called a consideration for the promise. In this situation, the consideration is known as executory consideration. Next, I will give the what is the meaning of the executory consideration to Auni. Thank you.
Executory consideration is a consideration for a promise or an act which consideration has not yet been performed and which the party who is to perform is either bound by contract to perform or not. Executory consideration consists of a promise to do something in return for a like promise. It is an exchange of promise. For example, a promise to carry out some work in return for a promise of payment. Consideration is said to be executed when one of the parties has performed his side of the contract, leaving the other party to carry out his obligation under the contract. Executed consideration must be distinguished from past consideration. In the case of executed consideration, the promise and the act are integral parts of the sum transaction. Where the consideration is past, the promise is given subsequent to and quite independently of the act. The rule that consideration can never be past means that a promise to do something now in return for services previously rendered is not binding, as there is no consideration at all. However, where one person is asked to carry out a task and that person reasonably assumes that a price will be fixed later, there is consideration in the form of an implied promise to pay at a reasonable rate.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Saleh. Based on the issue, Useless cannot take any legal action to make them useful. This is because the act of asking Useless to further his study at KPM Ipoh are considered as a moral obligation. A moral obligation will make the contract to be void. So, Useless cannot take any action to make them useful. There are 6 rules on consideration. The first rules are consideration need to be adequate. It must be the consideration must be sufficient. There must be no fraud or coercion and other factors that will give the consideration out of force. And the second rules are part payment may discharge an obligation. A small payment will will be made to satisfy an obligation to pay a larger sum. This involves a payment. And the third rules are moral obligation is not a good consideration. That is why useless cannot take any action to make them useful.
The fourth one is the public obligation is not a good consideration because a person who is under the duty to carry the public obligation cannot claim he is or her act as the consideration to one's promise. The fifth one is the consideration may move from the promise. It's because the consideration may be given by the third party other than the promisee. The sixth one is the unlawful consideration is not a good consideration. It because it is forbidden by law. It is of such a nature that if permitted, it would be defeated by any law. It is fraudulent. It involve or imply injury to the person or to the property of another. And the last one, the courts regard it as a immoral or opposed to public policy.
Hai, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurul Adrina binti Abdullah. I'm from DLM 4B. So, today I would like to talk about the conclusion about the case between Useless and his mother, Madam Useful. So, for the conclusion is, Useless cannot take the legal action against to her mother, which is Madam Useful, because it is a moral activities that cannot account as consideration. Other than that, the contract also entered by both parties, which is Useless and his mother. So, the contract are void at the first place. So, that's all from me. Thank you. Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nurul Alina binti Abdullah. I'm from DLM 4B. So, today I would like to talk about the intention of the Useless and his mother, Madam Useful. So, for the intention, it is to create the legal relation when the parties want to do the agreement that are ready to face the circumstance. So, if it fails to perform the obligation under the agreement, so regarding to the issue, it shows that Useless and his mother, Madam Useful, are family because they have a relationship between a mother and son. So, the agreement are void because it is not intended to be a legally enforceable. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Moira Sajida binti Zainal Arifin and I am from the M4B. So today, I would like to tell you what is permit agreement and the subtopic intention to create relation based on the relationship between Madam Useful and Useless. Family agreement is one of the presumptions on the existence of intention to create the legal relation that can conclude from the case law. Family agreements treated by the law as agreement that without intention to create legal relations. In the other words, the agreements are void, which is not intended to be legally enforceable. To illustrate for case Balfour versus Balfour, the husband is civil servant stationed in Ceylon. While on leave in England, he has promised to pay his wife a monthly allowance of 500 ringgit until she returns to Ceylon. The husband defaulted the promise and his wife sued him for breach of contract. In this situation, there were no legally binding agreement. The parties did not intend by legal consequence due to the good condition of the relationship between husband and wife. That's all from me.
Based on the issue, useless cannot take any legal action towards Madam Useful because the relationship between useless and Madam Useful are a mother and a son. This is considered as a moral obligation. Moral obligation are not considered as consideration if this is involved in any contract. The contract will become void. So, if the promise are broken, there are no way for useless to take any legal action towards Madam Useful.
If the relationship between Madam Useful and useless are not family, which is mother and son, the contract will be valid and useless can take legal action against Madam Useful for the breach of contract.
As we all know, intention to create legal relation is part of elements in contract. Intention to create legal relation is defined as an intention to enter a legally binding agreement or contract. Intention to create legal relation is one of the necessary elements in formation of a contract. It is because intention to create legal relation consists of readiness of a party to accept the legal sequence of having entered into an agreement. Intention to create legal relation is a motion of every contracting party must have the necessary intention to enter into a legally binding contract. Without intention to create legal relations, the contract may lack the binding effect. Besides that, when there is no intention to create legal relations, it will make the contract or agreement become less powerful due to whether one or both of the parties does not have a consent mind. So, if the contract lack of binding effect, it will cause the difficulty to the party involved in future. Without intention to create legal relations, the contract may become a mere promise. In addition, with no intention to create legal relations, it will make any contract to become a mere promise. Mere promises, simply like a simple promise, arise when there is no intention to create legal relations. With no intention to create legal relations, it may cause the contracting parties are not being legally binding, and these circumstances may cause the contract is enforceable. Therefore, when the contract is enforceable, the contracting parties cannot sue each other, and this will spoil their business crisis.